Hello and welcome to You Talking to Me, a special one since this will be the last debate of this kind we will have in the European Parliament for now. And our topic is nothing less than the future of the European Union and the challenges the bloc will have to meet in the following months. And I'm very happy to welcome in the studio here in Brussels MEPs Pervenche Berès from the Social Democrats. Hello and welcome. Mr. Sven Giegold from the Greens and Mr. Elmar Brok from the European People's Party. Hello and welcome. We are also joined by Jean-Michel, the editor-in-chief of Euranet Plus news agency in Brussels.
Hello, Danièle. Hello.
Bonjour.
Everybody.
And we cannot talk about the challenges the European Union has to meet without talking about migration. Of course, one of the countries most affected by this crisis is Greece. And to start, we have a question from Stavros Samoulidis from Sky Radio in Athens.
Following the European Commission's 9th progress report last month, it has been clear that neither the relocation scheme nor the resettlement one, both set up by Brussels, are working. Commissioner Timmermans has said recently that they now finally examine the possibility of imposing sanctions to member states that do not take their share of the relocation scheme. This way, leaving Greece and Italy alone in managing migration flows. Will the European Parliament push in the direction of imposing sanctions?
Mr. Brok.
I do not believe so that will be the case, but you cannot just mention Greece and some countries, but also Germany, who took the most of the migrants in the last 2 years. But I think we should find other mechanisms, which means fair burden sharing. Countries who do not take enough people on board because of different reasons, also historical reasons. Yeah, therefore it's not working, because we have to see that, especially, for example, in the countries of the former communist dictatorships, there was always said foreigners are a bad thing. There you have a situation that the society is not so far as it in other countries. We have it even in our own country. Pegida is in Dresden and not in Düsseldorf. It has its reasons. Because of this development of societies, because of that history, and that needs some time to overcome that, and therefore such countries have to take the burden sharing in order to get more money for fighting the root causes, or have a bigger share in costs, for example, in the European border guard. Burden sharing must be, but I think it's a moment not possible to do it in that equal share of distribution.
Mrs. Berès, so far only 13,000 people have been relocated within the European Union. They should be more than 100,000 until the end of the year. This is not very likely to happen. So how can we put up pressure here?
Yeah. Well, I think the idea by the Commission was the right one. From the beginning, the reaction by member state was quite appalling for most of them, because somehow they always wanted the dust to be in the neighborhood. And Elmar Brok mentioned the Germany as a country that is on the front line when dealing with migrants. I think you have mentioned Greece. I think you should not forget Italy. That is also a border where a lot of migrants are coming, and for a very long time. So I think it should be not neglected. But what does it say? It says that this challenge is going to be a long-term issue for the Union, and that nobody is going to solve it alone, and that you cannot only, this question of the reallocation is one among all the aspect that we have to look at. For a very long time, because the EU was in the crisis, the question of our development strategy and our support for African countries has been left aside. It must be a priority for us, because otherwise, if we are not solidar vis-à-vis these countries, this is going to go on. And you can call it refugees, or you can go for the debate on the economic migration. It's not the same debate, but still it is there. And the same happens with the foreign policy. I believe this will be a strong debate in the Germans' election also. It will be the same in France. But if the EU is not able to settle its own foreign policy with a defense strategy, we are a weak voice when things are happening just at our border, where we should be able to be heard.
Mr. Giegold, you don't seem to agree. And speaking about Germany, your country was pushing for this agreement with Turkey. Was it the right thing to do, to have this?
First, I would like to answer the question which was rightly asked from Greece. And the question was very clear. There was a decision also in the European Council to relocate a limited number of refugees. That's only a small part of the problem. And the big problem we have in Europe is that we take decisions and afterwards we don't implement it. And then we talk again about how to generally solve in a new way the problems. First, the decision has to be implemented, and the Commission has a responsibility, according to the treaties, to ensure the implementation. So the limited reallocation should also be implemented, and the Commission, of course, is right to tell Member States they have to keep to the promises. And then there's the long-term question, which Elmar Brok referred to, the question, what do we do in the long term? And there we speak about much larger numbers. And there I think it's right. We will have at the moment no way to have a full solidarity between the member states because some countries are not ready. And there has to be a sort of compensation, because it's hard to explain that we finance and with many member states the development all over Europe, and at the same time some countries say when it comes to sharing the burden of refugees, then we are not ready. So therefore there is a certain link. I'm against a threatening rhetoric like Martin Schulz, who said if you don't obey we take away the funds. That I think is the wrong rhetoric. It will not help the good people in Eastern Europe.
There's also no legal basis to do so.
There's also no legal basis, and it's really dangerous from a European way. But to tell our partners, if you don't want to take any refugees, there has to be some sort of compensation. That is a good way to deal with it in the future. But in the short run, the promises have to be kept.
But you're right, that's a terrible signal, because if we can't agree on taking certain number of relocation, which was not a huge number, and we were not able to agree on that. I mean, it was not a very big project. So at the end of the day, Europe showed that it was incapable of clearing this issue, and basically it was an historical failure.
I think it is important also to note how it started. In the beginning, also Greece was not ready. When the decision was taken and the energy for the relocation was there, Greece had great difficulties to tell exactly whom to reallocate. So the first phase of the failure was not only with the countries which didn't want to take any refugees, it was also the non-readiness to say who is to be reallocated. That is something which points again to failures of administration in Greece.
Eastern countries who don't want to take refugee because they are Muslim, it was a very bad signal.
Of course.
It has been said, so let's face the situation.
Of course, I acknowledge that.
Possibility to say also something in this debate?
Yes, that's a very good idea.
The floor is yours, and then we move on to Brexit, but you can add something.
I think this relocation question is the question, as I said before, where we see the different developments of society. And this creates a problem. Yes, you have to say that. But legally, Mr. Giegold is right, but we have to find a way to comfort that. Secondly, but relocation is the minor question. We are talking about how to deal with the symptoms, not solving the problems.
This is what I'm saying.
That's the problem. How can we get less migrants? And how can we, in a way, fighting root causes for migration, not just fighting what is also needed. That is the good purpose of the Turkey deal, the human traffickers, which is an incredible crime what these people do. But also, how can we have more money available to help refugees in other places? And we have to see when we're talking nastily, because of some good reasons, about Turkey.
Is Turkey the right ally here?
Turkey has taken 3 million refugees since 4 years, and only 10% of them in camps. The rest live in houses, in villages and cities. In South Turkey, you have villages and towns where 20–30% of the population are Syrian war refugees. And we can make a deal with that, not giving the money to the Turkish government, but that these people have a better housing, have medical service, have schools. Then I think it's a good deal to do that.
You don't have any issue that we have signed this deal with a very borderline government?
look, if we want to talk only make deals with democracies, then we are very lonely in this world. And then we can do no Africa policy. We can no development policy in Africa because the numbers on the states of democracy and the rule of law are very limited.
So this is
that
real
cannot
politics.
be the basis.
Yeah. Let's move to Brexit.
Let's move to Brexit.
The Brexit is, of course, in every mind at the moment because the European Union is trying to struggle this issue, and we think about what is the future with 27 members. And as a matter of fact, the Brexit shows that there is a sort of deep disenchantment for Europe, and people are a bit tired and fed up with Europe. Do you think that there is indeed EU citizens have lost interest for the European project? We start with you, Pervenche, if you may.
Well, it depends what European project you're speaking about. Huh? If it's a European project that is only about internal market, without any social standards, without any harmonization in our capacity to fight tax evasion, there's no dream about the European project. But I think people like us, we need to join our force to make sure that there are no simple solutions to the current situation. And when you see how difficult it is for UK to find out what can be their request, I mean, it was very simple to go to a referendum and to say no to the belonging to the EU. But now you can see the mess. So there's no simple solution outside the EU. So we better fix it. And how to fix it, I think, is really the core of what should be the debate in the next election in France, in Germany, in Netherlands, in different places, where politicians and people at the national level have to take their responsibility. What do they propose to their people as a future in the EU? And for this, once more, there's no simple solution. But there are 2 or 3 topic where I think we can be inclusive, make people understand that it's better to be stronger together. Let's look 2 very concrete topics where I'm sure many EU citizens are concerned for the future. Fight against terrorism. Who believes a member state can fight terrorism by building new border when terrorists, the main tool is a tool that is cross-border? And the same happened about tax evasion. So there are very good reasons to keep on fighting for this EU project. It cannot be the same because UK is leaving, because the outcome and the result of what we have built up to now is not enough. But let's put our strengths together and build the next step, which needs to be a step where, of course, there would be more social Europe, there would be more fairness in taxation, and that we can ensure what the promises of Europe.
But let's face the situation that during the campaign in France, and now we're going to talk about Germany if you want, nobody talks about Europe, or there is very few messages about Europe. I talk about France, the French campaign. I think it's quite a bit different in Germany.
I think you're wrong. At least I know one person who I hope will never be elected in France, who is only speaking about Europe. So you better answer to her.
That's true. You're absolutely right. I was wrong. There is at least 1 or 2 politicians who take the risk to talk about Europe, and it seems to be a risk nowadays. Mr. Brok, how is the situation in Germany?
First of all, I must say, it's the first time in my life that I heard that a moderator said I was wrong.
There's always a first time. So how is the situation in Germany?
I think in this European question, we are in a luxury problem, despite all the problems, because we have 2 candidates for Chancellor who are both convinced Europeans. That is a luxury problem, that I have preference for one of them. The present Chancellor is another story, but in this general sense is a way. And since we have this debate on that broad level, pro-European, we have less right-wing support for the right-wing party. It's going down the last 2-3 weeks. Hopefully that will continue. If you have 2 big parties where get a certain support, that is always bad for such parties, and hopefully that will continue. but we have the same debate as we as in European countries have. We have to see that 70 years after the war, the people come back and saying, nation forever, my country first. That's the principal question. But that's the old story before the Second World War, and always. If every country has to be number one, then these countries will fight in some time, because not everyone can be number one. Yeah. The result is starting with trade wars and then with other wars. That was always the circle. And here to find understanding, that is in with Brexit the question, we have to understand the interest of the others. And this is my problem with Brexit in that question, that I fear until now that we want to understand Britain to come to a positive result in these negotiations. We want not to have a revenge. But I have doubts that Britain understands our interests. This might be the main deep problem of the negotiations. The readiness for such a compromise which takes into account the interest of both sides, which is always needed if you want to have successful negotiations. Okay,
time is running. You mentioned trade wars. That leads us to our next topic, which is the international trade. It's a controversial topic since the interests of the European citizens, at least the concerns, are not always the same. The Commission shows, the European Commissions, or the industry. And we have a question from Claudia Knopke from AMS on that.
Hello, everybody. The negotiations and discussions on trade agreements like CETA have shown that the population is very skeptical, while the European industry is waiting for them to come. And the EU Commission has just been advertising for trade agreements. So, how can the interest of man and makers be brought together in trade agreements?
Mr. Giegold.
Well, here we have, of course, very different views. So the key point is trade and open markets were generally a good thing. That is also our position. But the problem with the trade agreements which have been negotiated by the European Commission, like with Canada, with Mr. Harper, they are not shaped by the agenda of a social market economy. So you have a lot of openings, lowering of tariffs, openings of many markets, while at the same time there are no strong environmental and social standards in there. There are some traces of it, but generally it will increase even more social inequalities on both sides of the trading partners. So what we believe is we need a new agenda for trade, which can win both interests. So the interests of the economic actors which want to have export interests and deepen the economic exchanges, but at the same time secure high social, environmental and taxation standards so that the two interests are brought together. And we have seen with CETA and the debate over TTIP that this sort of one-sided trade agreements has no basis in majorities in our societies. And therefore I think it's now the right time to rephrase a trade agenda which takes the concerns of citizens into account and has a clear role model, and that's the social market economy.
Mr. Brok, your party was fighting for CETA and said it's a very good agreement. Are people worried for nothing here?
First of all, they got partly wrong information, and Mr. Giegold was partly quite successful in that. But it's another story.
Tell me what I've said wrong. Please, say what's wrong.
This agreement keeps the standards. This agreement does not destroy any standard in the European Union in our member countries. For sure, these agreements cannot have agenda on social policy, on environmental policy on the same standard. That is the duty of every country, but the trade should not neglect that and have a proper way to do that, and that is safeguarded so that the danger not there. And we need these trade agreements. In Germany, my country has 40% of its GNP by trade. And therefore, I'm very much for trade in order to get the jobs and make no people afraid that it was done in the debate that the United States cannot take over now the city theater of Bielefeld or the water supply. It had nothing to do with these treaties. People were made afraid on issues which are not part of the treaty.
Okay, we cannot go into details, Mrs. Berès. Yes, of course.
My view on this point, because I think the Commission did a huge mistake. It was done in the previous commission by Commissioner de Gucht, and unfortunately Mrs. Malmström in this commission did the same mistake because she did follow the same line. You know, I'm very much in favor of trade because it can create wealth that you can redistribute. So for me, it's fine. But somehow in the trade business, there are some cycles. And we are entering a new cycle because for a very long time, trade agreement was about trade barrier, tariff. How do you say it?
Borders.
Tariffs.
Tariffs, and now this part of the negotiation is nearly over. So most of the negotiation is about non-tariff barriers. So this means you enter into the field of what is the sovereignty of the EU when it comes to its own legislation. That's the challenge. And also you have new incomers, the WTO is not working so well, and so on and so on. So the one who really wants to fight for trade, and I want to fight for trade because it can be a source of growth and wealth creation, needs to accept that there need to be a new doctrine of trade, that integrated dimension where citizens believe we are not betraying what they have decided as a collective choice for their society.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we are almost at the end. We move to the last
the last topic because we are going to explode our standard today. But I mean, for the last broadcast, it's not a big deal. Maybe we talk about two-speed Europe. The EU Commission has presented a white paper on the future of Europe. Future of Europe is one of the biggest topics nowadays, at least in the bubble. The list of scenarios presented by the Commission was following different parliamentarian reports. The reports Berès-Bug you were working on, and the report Brok-Bressot, Mr. Brok, you were also working on one of those reports. We start with Ms. Berès. If I may, your report is focusing on the principle of two-speed Europe with the Eurozone budget, with maybe the idea of having a Eurozone finance minister. Is it the future of Europe that a group of countries is going to go faster than the other one in the EU integration? Is that one of the main ideas that could save Europe today?
After Brexit, my dream is not to divide Europe. My dream is to get everybody on board, no doubt. But I cannot accept that member states that are outside the Eurozone would forbid Eurozone members to fix it. Because I can tell you, I mean, I'm not a dreamer. Huh? I'm just trying to fix what we have in our hand. Even though if I can have some dreams on top of it.
Yeah, we still have
I do have it. But if we don't fix the euro, tomorrow there will be no Europe. Because the day the euro will be destroyed, you can speak about internal market. It will not survive. So this is just a question of urgency. This means, I think, in the year to come, we need to have not only one dimension of the future of Europe. We need to have an inclusive project based on 2, 3, or 4 dimensions that could be inclusive for everybody. There will be some aspect in terms of external protection, security. There will be some aspect on how to deal with migrants. There will be some aspect on how to fix the Eurozone. But please don't allow non-Eurozone member to forbid any progress inside the Eurozone, because then there will be no Europe tomorrow.
I think we have a question coming from our members, Polskie Radio, and we're going to listen to it now.
It's Joachim Sisierski, yes.
Yes.
Hello from Warsaw. The idea of a two-speed Europe could lead into a much more deeper division between the rich and the poorer countries. It would also create a mental gap between the Europeans. So instead of bringing Europe together, it will divide the community even more. Aren't you afraid that the two-speed Europe will destroy that trust for Europe, also in countries like Poland, where 80% of the people are pro-European?
Mr. Brok.
Poland is welcome to join the euro as soon as possible, and the faster
it will last a little bit more time, I think.
Right.
Mr. Brok, I would like to have your reaction on that. And your report, I want to say shortly, your report is focusing on reforms without changing the EU treaty, so it's a more soft approach, if I may. But please.
But there's different speed, even in the Commission proposals of Mr. Juncker. Is totally in good connections to my report. The two-speed Europe we had all the time. The euro is one, the Schengen is one. The question is, do we do it with a permanent circle of the same countries, which put people in the second rank? No. It will be on issues, and there will be different members states in that. It must be always open for every country without any difficulties to join if they want and meet the criteria, and it must be done in the union institutions, no new institutions. And that must be the Commission, the Council, and the Parliament, and therefore it's not a division. If you would set up an own Eurozone administration with a full-time president, and that time you have the division. If you say, as I said in my report, the president of the Eurozone should be vice president of the Commission, then you have still the Community Institution Commission as running it.
We are saying the same in my report. Huh?
Yeah, we do not exclude that, and therefore I would like to invite our Polish friend, if we would follow his line, then his government and Mr. Kaczynski will decide about the speed of the European development, and we should not allow that. That he should discuss at home.
I fully agree with this point made, and we made a lot of effort when we created the banking union to create it in a way that it's open even for non-Eurozone members. And unfortunately, Poland and many other countries for whom we created that openness have not used it yet. Therefore, I also agree it would not be appropriate to say these are the good European countries and these are the ones who never want. It depends on the subject, and we have to continue constructing it that way. But what is dangerous is that at the moment the German government plans to upgrade the European Stability Mechanism outside of the community institutions to make it a sort of European Monetary Fund with many of the functions with the Brok report rightly puts, and also your report, into the community institutions, but make it an intergovernmental institution without control of the European Parliament, and also to limit the influence of the Commission. And that is wrong. And there we should really clearly say, if we move forward with integration, it has to be in the framework of strong European democracy. And this is what I lack in the Juncker proposals, that European democracy and the participation of citizens, the control rights of citizens, are not at the heart of the white book which Mr. Juncker has written.
Very last question.
Yeah, all the crises that we have, and we've talked about migration, Brexit, and now we talk about two-speed Europe, is not do we have to face that now new European Union with 28 or 27 countries? This is too complicated to manage, and we have to work in a different way. Is it the time to say that?
Very short answers, please.
No, I think it's very good that we are 27, and I hope that we will be able to reinforce our strengths together. It's not time to divide Europe.
Mr. Brok?
I think this Juncker approach is the right one, putting options, and have then the debate which shows that some of these options are not like shortcomings, and then come to the real point where this two-speed Europe is not dividing, but bringing things forwards. Jacques Delors has said once to this solution, this is the avant-garde solution, not the dividing one. The avant-garde solution, bring things go forward, and let countries come. Otherwise, we have always wait for the last train, and that can be last very long.
That could be.
Okay, Mr. Giegold.
Well, I think the pressures which come from Brexit as well as from the new administration in the US will help to reunite Europe. And there's no reason why we should at the moment give in and say it is too complicated. No, this project of integrating the continent is the right one, but we have to do it in an intelligent and democratic way.
Okay, we leave it here. This is the end of this debate. Thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Brok, Mr. Giegold, Mrs. Berès, Jean-Michel. This is Euranet Plus saying goodbye for now.